Are you ready to embark on an exciting and controversial journey through the Bible? Get ready to discover profound and surprising lessons that will challenge your beliefs and leave you intrigued until the very last second. In this video, we will unravel long-forgotten secrets of the Old Testament, revealing the truth behind shocking and inspiring stories. We promise a quick reward for your knowledge-thirsty mind and soul. So, are you curious to uncover the mysteries and hidden lessons in the story of Judges? Press play and embark on this transformative journey right now. The Bible is filled with fascinating narratives that highlight resilience and faith, overcoming challenging circumstances that motivate us and bring us closer to God. However, the scriptures also present sad and distressing episodes, clearly showing that no one's existence, not even the most devout, is exempt from constant adversities. There's a particularly disturbing passage in the Old Testament that, in my view, stands out as the most unsettling in the entire biblical text. Let's dive together into a passage from chapter 19, verse 1 of the book of Judges, the starting point for the story and lessons I want to share today. The text mentions a man from the tribe of Levi in a time when Israel was not ruled by a king. As we progress through the narrative, we discover that this Levite sought a companion and chose a woman from Bethlehem in Judah. However, their cohabitation became tense, leading her to return to her father's house. After about 4 months, the man, longing for reconciliation, set out in search of her, taking with him a servant and 2 donkeys. Upon arrival, he was warmly welcomed by the woman's father, who treated him with great hospitality, offering him food, drink, and rest for 3 days. Although he attempted to leave after this period, the father-in-law persuaded him to extend his stay. Finally, on the 5th day, despite the father-in-law's pleas for him to stay 1 more night, the Levite decided to depart. He, his companion, and the servant made their way to a city called Gibeah, continuing what would be a story full of significant events and lessons. As night began to fall, they were nearing the city. The servant suggested they stop there to rest, but the Levite preferred to avoid staying in a foreign place, deciding to continue on to Gibeah, an Israelite municipality belonging to the tribe of Benjamin. Upon arrival, they found themselves without shelter, an unusual situation as it was customary among the Israelites to offer hospitality to fellow travelers. However, on that night, the expected solidarity did not materialize, and they were forced to stay in the public square, abandoned. Eventually, an old man returning from work in the fields approached them. Originally from the tribe of Ephraim, he took pity on them and welcomed them into his home. During their stay, the situation took an alarming turn when the house was surrounded by men from the city with nefarious intentions. They demanded that the Levite be handed over to satisfy their wicked desires. Desperate to protect his guest, the host offered his virgin daughter and the Levite's companion as alternatives. Tragically, the concubine was forcibly taken outside and subjected to terrible sexual abuse and violence throughout the night. At daybreak, the woman, severely shaken and exhausted, returned to the house where she was staying, collapsing by the door. The Levite, upon finding her, encountered a devastating scene. She was lifeless. Amidst shock and grief, he took a startling action. He loaded the body onto one of his donkeys, carrying it back to his home. There, he made an even more disturbing decision. With a knife, he dismembered the corpse into 12 parts and sent each part to the various tribes of Israel, accompanied by a message recounting the barbarity perpetrated by the Benjamites. The account of this man caused consternation among the tribes. The atrocity was of such magnitude that the Israelites compared it to the darkest episodes since the time of the Egyptian Exodus. The outrage was unanimous, and everyone questioned how to respond to the brutal murder of a fellow countrywoman. However, the story does not end there. Chapters 20 and 21 of the Book of Judges unravel the repercussions of this horrendous act. But before we proceed, there are crucial lessons to be drawn from this lamentable event. The first is a poignant reminder. The absence of authority or accountability in our lives often leads us away from righteousness and the teachings of the Lord. It is a call to reflect on the importance of keeping our actions aligned with ethical and moral values, even when we seem to be on the outskirts of direct observation. Do you recall the verse I mentioned at the beginning of this video? In it, it states that at that time, Israel was without a king. This implies that when there is no one to be held accountable or responsible for our decisions, the likelihood of choosing incorrect attitudes increases. Let's observe the behavior of the Benjamites, who committed atrocities against the woman until they led her to death. If there had been established leadership in Israel, we question, would they have acted in the same way? Probably not, as existing authority would have restrained them, judged them, and very likely sentenced them to death. One might argue, but although Israel did not have a king, it had the Mosaic laws. Yes, that is correct. However, these laws were often neglected, with no one to ensure their strict enforcement. This situation reflects a phenomenon not exclusive to one nation, but observed globally. In many contemporary countries, including established democracies and developing nations, there are constitutions and legislations that outline rights and obligations, as well as defining what is allowed and prohibited. However, the lack of fear, disregard for others, and perception of impunity are global challenges, causing these laws to be frequently ignored or inadequately applied in various societies around the world. Relating to the biblical narrative, we realize that the Benjamites acted with impunity because they knew there would be no consequences. This reflection serves as a warning to us, emphasizing the importance of responsibility and respect for laws, whether divine or human. The second lesson teaches us to recognize that our true judge is in heaven, perceiving each of our actions. Furthermore, the story invites us to see every human being as a creation in the image and likeness of God. If the concubine and the host's daughter had been viewed from this perspective, the tragic events would not have occurred. I am not only referring to the vile acts of the Benjamites, but also to the actions of the father and the husband of the concubine. The host pleaded for the Levite not to be handed over to the violent men, indicating his perception that such an act would be horrendous. However, paradoxically, he did not show the same consideration for the integrity of his daughter and the concubine, offering them in an act of extreme cowardice. This reveals that in his view, the man's life was more valuable than that of the two women. As for the husband, he failed to protect his companion. Although he did not offer her, his inaction in the face of the abuse, beating, and death inflicted on her by the Benjamites demonstrates a serious failure in his duty of care and protection. His passivity in the face of the sacrifice offered reveals a grave distortion of values where human safety and dignity were disregarded. If divine love filled their hearts as it did with their predecessors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they would never have committed such atrocities. As 1 John 4:8 teaches us, the absence of love reveals a lack of knowledge of God, for He is the personification of love. The third lesson teaches us that distancing ourselves from God makes us susceptible to unimaginable attitudes. Analyzing the Book of Judges from the beginning, we observe the spiritual decline of a nation that gradually strayed from the divine path, often without even realizing it. The culmination of this distancing is evidenced in chapters 19 to 21, illustrating how far they were from God. If someone had predicted to these people, years earlier, that they would commit an act as horrendous as the rape and murder of an innocent woman, they would probably have rejected the idea, believing themselves incapable of such brutality. However, as history shows, it was exactly what happened. Therefore, it is crucial to maintain a constant and conscious connection with God. Without this vigilance, we risk losing ourselves in paths we never thought we would tread. By keeping our faith and character aligned with divine teachings, we can avoid repeating past mistakes and cultivate an environment of love and mutual respect. Our capacity for good or evil should not be underestimated. As discussed, even firm declarations like, "I will never get divorced," "I will never cheat on my spouse," "I will never use drugs," or "I will never be fired for committing fraud," may not hold up if we distance ourselves from the principles and values we claim to follow. Proximity to God, or the lack thereof, profoundly influences our choices and actions. Remember, the further we stray from the divine path, the more susceptible we become to falling into temptations and committing acts that we currently condemn. And thus, we move on to the fourth lesson extracted from this narrative. The indignation of the Israelites at the vile act of the Benjamites catalyzed the mobilization of an army of 400,000 men determined to seek justice. The refusal of the Benjamites to hand over the wrongdoers precipitated a bloody confrontation. In the first 2 days of battle, the Israelites faced severe defeats. However, after consulting God and strategizing an ambush, they achieved a decisive victory on the third day, devastating Gibeah and bringing the tribe of Benjamin to the brink of extinction. This fratricidal war culminated in the near-total annihilation of the Benjamites. Men, women, and children were killed, leaving only 600 men who escaped to the wilderness. This tragic episode highlights the extreme cost of straying from divine guidelines and the disastrous consequences of actions guided by vengeance and hatred instead of forgiveness and justice. The fourth lesson that emerges from this narrative is complex and multifaceted, reflecting on the making of hasty decisions and their long-term consequences. The Israelites, in a moment of intense emotion and indignation, swore not to allow marriages between their daughters and the Benjamites. This oath, made without full consideration of its future repercussions, led to a critical situation. The threat of extinction of the tribe of Benjamin due to the lack of women to ensure the continuity of their lineage. To overcome the impasse without violating their oath and still maintaining obedience to God, the Israelites devised a controversial plan. They attacked Jabesh-Gilead, a city that did not join them against the Benjamites, and captured women for the remaining Benjamites. However, this was not enough, as there were still not enough women. So they advised the Benjamites to abduct women during a festival in Shiloh, a solution that technically did not violate the oath, but was morally questionable. The decision made in a moment of fervor and the subsequent solution found highlight the moral complexity and unintended consequences of our choices. The lesson here underscores the importance of reflection and deliberation before making oaths or decisions of great impact, especially when ethics and the future of a community are at stake. It also teaches about the need to seek solutions that not only address the immediate problem, but are fair and righteous in the eyes of God and men, avoiding patches that, while not violating previous agreements, contradict fundamental moral principles. Fifth lesson: the chain of events triggered by bad choices clearly demonstrates that every action has its consequences, often irreversible and unpredictable. The saga begins with the unfortunate decision of a man to hand over the concubine and her daughter to the Benjamites, resulting in the tragic death of an innocent. This action unleashed a series of violent reactions. The Benjamites committed atrocities that led to the siege and near destruction of their city and people. The leaders of the other tribes, in deciding to fight the Benjamites, faced the painful reality of nearly exterminating one of the groups that God had established. The decision not to allow marriages with the Benjamites led to more violence and the suffering of many innocent women, Each choice made had profound and often tragic consequences, revealing a vicious cycle of action and reaction. The Apostle Paul, in Galatians 6, warns us about this universal principle: we reap what we sow. If we choose to sow in the field of sin, the consequences will inevitably be painful and harmful. The lesson to be drawn is that, although we have the freedom to make choices, we do not have the power to choose the consequences. They unfold according to the nature of our actions, often affecting not only ourselves, but also many around us. It is a call to responsibility and reflection in the choices we make, recognizing that each decision shapes our future and can impact many lives beyond our own. So the sixth lesson is clear: what we sow, we will reap. Those who live to satisfy carnal desires will inevitably reap destruction and spiritual death. On the other hand, those who seek to please the Spirit will reap eternal life. Therefore, we must persevere in doing good, for in due time we will reap an abundance of blessings if we do not give up. At the end of this story of Judges, we see the Benjamites rebuilding their lives, marrying again, and repopulating their tribe. However, the scars of the wounds remain deep in their souls. Similarly, when we repent and seek God's forgiveness after straying from Him, He welcomes us back with love. However, the consequences of our wrong choices may persist, leaving marks on our lives and the lives of those we have harmed. Therefore, the final lesson is clear. We must seek God daily and align ourselves with His Word to avoid repeating the mistakes of the people of Israel. Recognizing the reality of the law of spiritual sowing and reaping, we must strive to sow good actions and cultivate healthy relationships with God and others. Only then can we avoid the suffering and devastating consequences of our bad choices, living in harmony with the divine will. Want more revealing insights and engaging stories? Don't waste time. Subscribe now, like, comment and share so you don't miss any video full of wisdom and inspiration. Together, we can explore even more secrets of the Bible and transform lives. Until the next episode,